Space shimmered as the Vanguard emerged from the black void of hyperspace. Its hull gleamed a dull gray, battered from countless battles, but still holding strong. The ship was a relic by galactic standards, small, outdated, and hopelessly primitive compared to the sleek vessels of the Zalith Armada that waited ahead. Their fleet stretched across the void like a metal wall, hundreds of warships gleaming with energy cannons and plasma arrays. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Elias Thorne stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on the enemy formation displayed on the holoscreen. His crew worked quietly around him, their faces pale but determined. No one spoke of the odds. They all knew the truth. One human corvette against the might of the Zalith Empire wasn't a battle. It was a death sentence. A crackle of static echoed through the comms before a voice, smooth and mocking, filled the bridge. "Humans," the Zalith commander drawled, his tone dripping with disdain. "Your defiance amuses us. Surrender now and perhaps we'll spare a few of you as pets. Resist, and we'll scatter your ashes across the stars." Laughter echoed through the fleet channel. Cold, alien laughter from a species that had crushed a dozen worlds beneath their iron grip. Elias didn't answer. Instead, he turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Ayla Park. "Status?" he asked calmly. Ayla's fingers danced over the console, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Energy level stable. Experimental drive fully charged. All systems ready, Captain." "And the payload?" "Secured and primed." Elias allowed himself a faint smile. "Good. Helm, take us forward." "Aye, Captain." The deck hummed beneath their feet as the Vanguard surged toward the enemy fleet. The Zalith ships adjusted their formation, spreading out like predators preparing to encircle their prey. Plasma turrets swiveled into position, targeting locks buzzed faintly in the air. "This is madness," muttered Ensign Carter, gripping the edge of his console. "We're just one ship. They'll tear us apart before we get close enough to do anything." Elias didn't respond. He could feel the tension tightening around his crew like a vice. They were brave, every one of them, but bravery alone wouldn't save them. Not against odds like this. Another burst of static as the Zalith commander returned, amusement lacing his voice. "Still no reply? Come now, humans. Show some dignity in your final moments." Elias leaned forward and pressed a button on the console, opening the comms. "Zalith Fleet, this is Captain Elias Thorne of the Vanguard. You've made a mistake today." Silence answered him. Then more laughter. "And what mistake is that, little human? You underestimated us." The comms cut as Elias gestured to Ayla. She nodded, fingers flying over her console as she activated the ship's primary weapon, a technology born from desperation, developed in secret after humanity's near annihilation at the hands of the Zalith. The weapon had never been tested in live combat. Not until now. The enemy fleet opened fire. Streams of plasma bolts and railgun slugs streaked through the void, lighting space with flashes of blue and orange. The Vanguard twisted and rolled, engines flaring as it weaved between the onslaught. Shields flared as impacts struck home, sending tremors through the hull. "Forward shields down to 60%, Ayla called out. "Hold course," Elias ordered. A Zalith cruiser loomed ahead, its broadside cannons glowing with charged energy. The Vanguard shot past beneath it, too close for the larger ship to adjust its aim. But more vessels crowded ahead, filling every escape route with walls of metal and fire. "They're closing in!" shouted Carter. Elias kept his eyes on the viewport. The enemy ships swelled larger and larger until their hulls seemed close enough to touch. The hum of the ship's core grew louder, climbing to a sharp electric pitch. The lights flickered. 5 seconds to firing range." Ayla's voice was taut with strain. Time seemed to slow. Elias exhaled, steady and calm as the moment arrived. Fire! A burst of silent white light exploded from the Vanguard's bow. The beam lanced forward like a spear of molten glass, piercing through the nearest cruiser's hull and emerging out the other side. The ship didn't explode. It simply vanished, its atoms scattered into the void in an instant. The beam swept sideways, slicing through 3 more vessels before their captains could react. Shock rippled through the Zalith fleet as ships began to break formation, scrambling to evade the impossible weapon. But the Vanguard pressed forward, weaving through the chaos like a predator among panicked prey. The white beam flared again, severing a battleship's command tower in a single stroke. Chain explosions rippled across its hull as secondary reactors ignited. Another cruiser disintegrated mid-turn, leaving only debris tumbling through space. 23 ships down! Ayla shouted over the roar of alarms and engine noise. Elias gripped the console as the ship rocked from a glancing hit. Smoke hissed from an overloaded conduit, but the crew pressed on. A desperate message crackled through the comms. "Human vessel, cease fire, we surrender! Repeat, we surrender!" The signal cut off as another beam struck home. Fire and twisted metal blossomed silently in the void. The remaining ships broke formation, fleeing in every direction. But the Vanguard pursued them relentlessly, its experimental drive bending space around it, closing distances in the blink of an eye. Each burst of white light erased another vessel from existence. Finally, only a handful of ships remained, scattered and broken. The Zalith commander's voice returned, no longer mocking. Now it was ragged with terror. "Please, we yield! Spare us! We didn't know!" Elias stood unmoving on the bridge, eyes cold. "You should have thought of that before you came to our world." The final shot lanced through the command ship's heart, tearing it apart in a silent blossom of flame. Silence fell. Only drifting debris remained, where a mighty armada had once stood. Elias released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Around him, the crew sagged with exhaustion, shock, and the first glimmers of hope. "They mocked this ship," Elias murmured, "but they won't forget it now." He turned to the helm. "Set course for Earth. Let's go home." The Vanguard vanished into the void, leaving only echoes of fire and fear behind. The Vanguard slipped into hyperspace, leaving the shattered remnants of the Zalith Armada drifting in the void. Silence settled over the bridge as the crew absorbed the impossible victory they had just achieved. Breathless tension still clung to the air, but beneath it stirred something more potent. Hope. Elias stood at the helm, gazing at the streaking stars through the viewport. His reflection stared back at him. Worn eyes, graying hair, the lines of a man who had seen too much war. Yet, for the first time in years, his shoulders felt a fraction lighter. Behind him, Ayla Park broke the silence. "Captain, all systems stable. The weapon core is holding, though the energy matrix needs recalibration. We won't get another full-power shot without a recharge." Elias nodded, absorbing the information. The Vanguard had wielded humanity's last desperate gamble, and it had worked. But the weapon, codenamed Oblivion Lance, wasn't without limits. Too much strain, and the core would overload, tearing the ship apart from within. Carter exhaled a shaky breath from his console. "I still can't believe it. A whole fleet, just gone." "Believe it," Elias said. His voice was steady, but his mind churned beneath the calm surface. Victory had been swift and brutal, but the consequences would ripple across the galaxy. The Zalith Empire wouldn't take this humiliation lightly. They would come again, stronger, angrier. A chime from Ayla's console drew her attention. Her fingers flew across the controls, brow furrowing. "Captain, I'm detecting a priority transmission from Earth Command. It's encrypted Omega-level clearance." Elias stepped forward. Omega-level messages were reserved for matters of galactic security, usually bad news. Patch it through. The main hollow screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Helena Vex. Her uniform was crisp, her silver hair pulled back into a tight braid, but her eyes carried the weary weight of too many desperate decisions. "Captain Thorne," she began without preamble, "you've done what no one thought possible. The destruction of the Zalith fleet has bought Earth precious time, but we cannot afford to rest." Elias nodded. "I understand, Admiral. What's our next move?" Vex's gaze hardened. "The Zalith High Command has issued a sector-wide kill order. They've vowed to erase humanity from existence. Intelligence reports indicate they're mobilizing their flagship, the Zar Karath, a dreadnought capable of obliterating entire planets. It's en route to Earth as we speak." Murmurs of alarm rippled through the bridge crew. Elias's fists clenched behind his back. "Estimated time of arrival?" 72 hours, Vex replied grimly. "Earth's planetary defenses won't hold against the Zarkarath. The Vanguard is our only chance. You must intercept and destroy that dreadnought before it reaches Earth. Failure is not an option." Elias's throat tightened, but he nodded. "Understood, Admiral. We'll stop them." "Good. I've transmitted coordinates for a supply station where you can refuel and rearm. After that, you're on your own. Earth is counting on you, Captain. Don't fail us." The screen flickered off, leaving the bridge heavy with unspoken tension. Carter swallowed hard. "The Zarkarath. Captain, we barely survived a fleet of standard warships, a dreadnought of that size. We have no choice," Elias cut him off, his tone sharp but not unkind. "We stand, or humanity falls." Silence settled again, broken only by the hum of the engines. Then Ayla spoke, her voice quieter. "The weapon might not be enough this time." Elias turned to her, brow furrowed. "Explain." "The Oblivion Lance was designed to punch through shields and hulls with raw energy, but the Zarkarath has quantum phase armor. Direct hits might not fully penetrate, and the core's recharge limitations mean we can't rely on repeated shots." "So we need to get closer," Elias said, mind racing. "Inside their defenses, deliver a critical strike from within." "Captain," Carter began, but Elias raised a hand. "I know the risks, but this isn't just a battle. It's humanity's survival." His gaze swept the bridge, locking eyes with each crew member in turn. "We've already proven what one ship can do. Now we finish what we started." The crew straightened, spines stiffening with resolve. No more doubts, no more hesitation. "Helm," Elias commanded, voice firm. "Set course for the supply station. Maximum speed." The Vanguard surged forward, engines blazing as it raced toward the next impossible battle. Deep in the void, unseen eyes watched its passage. And far ahead, beyond the reach of human sensors, the Zarkarath loomed like a metal leviathan, waiting to deliver humanity's final judgment. The Vanguard dropped out of hyperspace near the supply station, a squat metal fortress clinging to the edge of a dead star system. Faint light from the distant white dwarf cast long shadows across its hull. Automated drones guided the ship into a docking bay, magnetic clamps locking onto its hull with a dull thud. "Docking complete," Carter announced. "Begin resupply operations immediately," Elias ordered. He turned to Ayla. "How long to recharge the weapon core?" 6 hours for a full recharge, Captain. The station's energy grid should speed up the process." "Make it happen." As the crew sprang into action, Elias stepped off the bridge, his footsteps echoing down the narrow corridor. The faint hum of machinery pulsed through the ship's walls, a heartbeat of steel and circuits. He passed crew members moving purposefully, their faces tight with exhaustion and fear. They all knew what awaited them beyond this brief respite. The dreadnought Zarkarath, a name whispered with terror across countless worlds. Twice the size of Earth's largest space station, armored with quantum phase plating that shifted between dimensions to deflect conventional weaponry. Its primary cannon could shatter continents from orbit, and now it was coming for Earth. Elias stopped at a viewport and gazed out into the void. The blackness seemed deeper here, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. His reflection stared back, hollow eyes, shoulders heavy with the weight of impossible choices. "Thinking too loud again, Captain?" He turned to find Ayla beside him, her dark eyes searching his face. "Hard not to," he replied. "We've bought Earth time, but this next battle? It's different. We're not facing a fleet, just one ship." "Just one ship," she echoed with a wry smile. "A flying fortress that could wipe us out with a single shot." Elias nodded slowly. "We've always been underestimated, first by the Galactic Council, then by the Zalith, but we proved them wrong, and we'll do it again." Ayla's gaze hardened. "Even if it means we don't come back?" Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Elias answered, "If that's the price of saving Earth, then so be it." Hours later, the final resupply was complete. Crates of munitions, reactor fuel, and emergency rations had been transferred aboard. Engineers had replaced damaged hull plating and reinforced the ship's internal shielding. The Oblivion lance pulsed faintly beneath the deck, fully recharged and waiting. On the bridge, Elias stood before the crew, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of holoscreens. He let his gaze linger on each one: Ayla, fierce and unyielding; Carter, young and uncertain but determined; the engineers, gunners, and technicians who had kept the Vanguard alive against impossible odds. "This is it," Elias said, his voice steady. "The Zalith thought they could break us. They burned our colonies, destroyed our fleets, tried to erase us from the stars. But we're still here. We've shown them what one human ship can do, and now we're going to finish this." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The Zarkareth is more than a warship. It's a symbol of their power, their arrogance. If we destroy it, we shatter their grip on the galaxy. We prove that humanity won't be erased." Silence hung heavy in the air. Then Ayla stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "They mocked us. They called us weak. But after today, they'll fear the name Vanguard." A murmur of agreement swept through the crew. Elias felt the shift in the air. The fear was still there, but now it burned alongside something stronger. "Take your stations," he ordered. "Let's finish what we started." Minutes later, the Vanguard disengaged from the supply station and drifted into open space. Its engines flared, pushing the ship forward as the jump drive spooled up. The distant stars seemed to draw closer, blurring into streaks of light as space twisted around the hull. A final transmission crackled through the comms, Admiral Vex's voice, sharp and clear. "Good hunting, Vanguard. Earth is watching." Then the ship vanished into hyperspace, racing toward a final confrontation that would decide the fate of humanity. But far ahead, unseen in the void, the Zarkarath waited. And it was ready. The Vanguard dropped out of hyperspace into a starless void, the designated intercept point where humanity would make its final stand. No planets orbited this stretch of space. No distant suns offered their faint glow. Only darkness stretched in every direction, broken only by the faint shimmer of distant galaxies. Silence hung heavy on the bridge. The crew moved with tense precision, eyes flicking between their consoles and the vast emptiness beyond the viewport. "Scan the area," Elias ordered, stepping forward with hands clasped behind his back. Ayla's fingers danced across the sensor array. The holographic display shimmered, revealing the void in all directions. For a moment, nothing appeared. Then, "Contact!" Ayla's voice cut through the silence. One vessel inbound, bearing 097 Mark 20, range 4 million kilometers and closing fast. Visual, Elias commanded. The main holoscreen flickered, and the crew's breath collectively caught. The Zarkarath emerged from the void like a metal leviathan, its black hull absorbing the faint starlight. Sharp, angular armor plates jutted from its massive frame, reinforced with the shimmering haze of quantum phase shielding. Rows of plasma cannons and railgun turrets lined its flanks, while its prow bristled with the maw of its primary weapon, the Helios cannon, capable of burning entire cities from orbit. The dreadnought advanced with terrifying grace, its engines burning with cold blue fire. Despite its size, it moved with the certainty of a predator closing in on helpless prey. "They're hailing us," Carter reported, his voice taut. Elias's gaze never left the viewport. "Put them through." Static crackled across the comms before a voice filled the air, smooth, cold, and laced with unmistakable contempt. "Human vessel, this is High Commander Valak of the Zalith Empire. Your destruction is inevitable. Power down your systems and surrender. Perhaps I will grant you a swift death." Elias leaned forward, eyes hard. "Valak, you've already made one mistake. Don't make another." Laughter echoed through the speakers, low, alien laughter that sent a chill through the crew. "Mistake? You misunderstand, human. We allowed your pitiful victory because it amused us, but now we end your species." The transmission cut, leaving only the hum of the Vanguard systems. Elias inhaled slowly, then exhaled. His pulse hammered in his chest, but his voice remained steady. "Shields to maximum. Charge the Oblivion Lance and prepare all weapons." Alarms pulsed softly through the ship as red lights bathed the bridge. The hum of the core deepened, vibrating beneath their feet as energy built within the ship's heart. The air grew heavy with anticipation and fear. Isla's voice cut through the tension. "The Zarkarath is accelerating, closing to engagement range." Elias gripped the edge of the console. This was it. There would be no retreat. "Hold steady," he ordered. The void between the two ships seemed to shrink as seconds dragged into eternity. Then, without warning, the Zarkarath opened fire. Blinding arcs of plasma streaked across the void, burning through space like molten lances. Kinetic slugs the size of shuttles tore through the vacuum at hypersonic speeds. The Vanguard twisted violently, its inertial dampeners straining to compensate as it wove through the incoming fire. "Shields at 70%, Carter shouted. "Return fire," Elias barked. The Vanguard's railguns and plasma cannons spat fire into the void, striking against the dreadnought's shields in bursts of blue and orange flame. But the Zarkarath's armor held firm, deflecting the barrage with shimmering waves of energy. Elias's gaze flicked to Ayla. "Status of the Oblivion Lance?" "Charging at 75%. 1 minute until full power," she replied, fingers flying over her console. The dreadnought fired again, this time with its starboard plasma arrays. Blue fire washed over the Vanguard's hull, sending violent tremors through the deck. Sparks burst from overloaded consoles, and the lights flickered as power conduits strained beneath the assault. "Shields down to 40%, Carter shouted over the noise. "Hold the line," Elias shouted back. "Helm, bring us in closer. Starboard approach, low angle. We need to break through their outer defenses." The Vanguard dove beneath the dreadnought's forward cannons, skimming along its armored underbelly. Explosions bloomed as its plasma cannons raked across the massive hull, scorching black scars into the quantum phase plating. But the Zarkarath's secondary turrets swiveled in response, unleashing a barrage of railgun fire that tore into the Vanguard's aft section. "Hull breaches on decks 3 and 5, automatic bulkhead sealing," Ayla reported, her voice tight with strain. Elias clenched his fists against the console, eyes fixed on the dreadnought's massive form looming above them. Time was running out. They had to strike now, or not at all. Lance status? 90%, just a few more seconds, Ayla called out, sweat glistening on her brow as she monitored the charging sequence. The dreadnought's primary weapon, the Helios cannon, began to glow, an ominous golden light building at its prow as energy surged into its firing core. If it fired now, the Vanguard would be reduced to ash. "Captain," Carter's panicked voice rose above the alarms. "Hold your ground," Elias shouted. "We fire first." A split second before the Helios cannon reached critical charge, Ayla's voice rang out. "Oblivion Lance, ready!" "Fire!" Elias roared. Space ignited as a beam of white light erupted from the Vanguard's bow, lancing straight toward the Zarkarath's core. The beam struck the dreadnought's shields, and for a heartbeat, it seemed to hold. Then, the shields shattered in a cascade of energy as the beam punched through the dreadnought's forward hull, carving a path of molten destruction through its internal decks. Explosions erupted across its surface as secondary reactors detonated, scattering debris into the void. But the Helios cannon, half-charged and destabilized by the impact, erupted in a chain reaction of golden fire that consumed the dreadnought's forward section in a cataclysmic explosion. The blast wave hurled the Vanguard backward, its shields flaring as the ship tumbled through space. Elias clung to the console as the ship shuddered violently, the lights flickering and alarms blaring in his ears. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the shaking ceased. Silence fell. Smoke drifted through the air as emergency systems kicked in, restoring power to the bridge. Elias staggered upright, gripping the console for support. His eyes locked on the viewport, and widened. The Zarkarath still moved. Its forward section had been obliterated, but the dreadnought's core systems remained intact. Fires raged along its hull as atmosphere vented into space, but it continued its slow, relentless advance, and its remaining weapons were charging. "They're still operational," Carter gasped. Elias's breath caught in his chest. The Oblivion Lance had failed to deliver a killing blow, and now Earth's last hope hung by a thread. The dreadnought's surviving turrets began to rotate, locking onto the crippled Vanguard. "Captain," Ayla's voice was strained, but her eyes met his without hesitation. "We need a new plan now." The Vanguard spun through the void, hull scorched and shields flickering as it struggled to stabilize. Elias clung to the console, jaw clenched as the deck rattled beneath his boots. Smoke hissed from overloaded circuits, and the air crackled with the scent of burnt ozone. But none of it mattered. Not when the Zarkarath still advanced, wounded but unrelenting. "Damage report," Elias barked. "Main reactor holding, but secondary systems are failing," Carter shouted over the alarms. "Shields at 22%. Hull integrity critical on the port side. One more direct hit and we're done." "And the Oblivion Lance?" Elias turned sharply to Ayla. She wiped blood from a gash on her temple, her hands moving rapidly across the console. "The core's overheated from the last shot. It'll take at least 5 minutes to cool before we can fire again, and even then, we'll only get one more shot at partial power." Elias's mind raced. The lance had broken through the dreadnought's shields, but it hadn't delivered the killing blow. The Zarkarath was still operational, and its remaining weapons were locking onto the crippled Vanguard. A warning klaxon blared. Carter's voice cracked with panic. "They're targeting us! Plasma arrays charging!" The viewport flashed as the dreadnought's cannons fired, blue-white lances of energy streaking across the void. The Vanguard veered hard to starboard, the inertial dampeners straining to compensate. One plasma blast grazed the hull, melting armor and sending shockwaves through the ship. Helm, evasive maneuvers, Elias shouted. Keep us moving. Don't let them get a clean shot. The Vanguard twisted and rolled, engines burning hot as it danced through the onslaught. But the Zarkarath pursued relentlessly, its sheer size allowing it to absorb damage as it closed the distance. Railgun slugs the size of cars tore through the void, missing the Vanguard by meters. One shot clipped the stern, shredding an engine nacelle in a burst of fire and debris. "We're losing thrust," Carter cried. "Redirect power from non-essential systems," Elias ordered. "Keep us moving!" The crew scrambled to obey, but the odds were stacking against them. The Vanguard was fast and maneuverable, but the damage was slowing it down. And the Dreadnought was closing in, piece by piece, forcing them into a shrinking sphere of survival. Elias's eyes narrowed as the Zarkarath's forward section reoriented. Its secondary plasma cannon, smaller than the main Helios cannon but still capable of obliterating a starship, began to charge. White-hot energy gathered within its barrel, a promise of imminent destruction. "We need that shot now, Ayla," Elias shouted, gripping the console so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I need more time!" she shouted back, sweat streaking her brow as she forced power through the overheating weapon core. 1 minute. Just 1 minute." "We won't get a minute," Carter cried. "They're about to fire—" Elias's mind snapped into focus. 1 minute. 1 shot. The Dreadnought's weakened forward hull was their only chance. But the plasma cannon would fire first unless— "Helm!" he shouted. "Full power to forward thrusters, ramming speed!" A collective gasp echoed through the bridge. Carter spun toward him, eyes wide. "Captain?" "You heard me," Elias snapped. "Get us close, right down their throat." "Captain, that's suicide," Ayla shouted. "It's our only chance," Elias roared. "We get inside their weapons range. They can't target us without hitting themselves. We hold them there until the lance is ready." A moment of silence. Then, "Aye, Captain," the helm officer shouted. The Vanguard surged forward, engines burning hotter than ever before. The deck shuddered beneath their feet as the ship accelerated toward the Dreadnought's scorched forward hull. The Zarkarath's plasma cannon fired. A beam of white-hot energy streaked past the Vanguard's port side, close enough to scorch the hull. Metal screamed as heat seared through armor plating, but the ship held its course. "Forward shields failing," Carter shouted. "Hold it steady," Elias bellowed. The Dreadnought's point defense turrets opened fire, railgun slugs and plasma bolts streaking toward the charging corvette. The Vanguard twisted and rolled, dodging as much as possible, but impacts hammered the hull like sledgehammers. Bulkheads groaned, and secondary explosions rocked the lower decks. 30 seconds until the lance is ready," Ayla shouted, voice strained with urgency. "Bring us in close, right beneath their command deck," Elias commanded. The Vanguard dove beneath the Dreadnought's forward hull, skimming so close that its scorched metal plates filled the entire viewport. The Dreadnought's weapons couldn't depress far enough to fire. The Vanguard was too close, too fast, locked within their blind spot. But the Zalith weren't done yet. Internal point defense turrets emerged from hidden compartments, spraying plasma fire along the ship's surface. The Vanguard twisted and rolled as blasts scorched its armor. A voice crackled through the comms. Valek's voice, furious and strained. "You think you can escape your fate, human? You've sealed your own death." Elias hit the comms with a snarl. "We're not the ones dying today, Valek." "Ayla, now!" "Lance ready," she shouted. Elias didn't hesitate. "Fire, full power!" The Vanguard's hull shuddered as the Oblivion lance unleashed its final shot. White light filled the viewport as the beam tore into the Dreadnought's exposed core. Punching through layers of armor and internal bulkheads, striking deep into the heart of its main reactor. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Zarkarath erupted from within. Fire and molten metal burst from every seam in the Dreadnought's hull. Internal explosions cascaded through its decks as the core destabilized, chain reactions igniting ammunition caches and plasma conduits. The entire forward section crumpled inward before blowing outward in a blinding shockwave of fire and debris. The Vanguard tumbled violently as the blast wave struck, emergency thrusters firing wildly to stabilize the ship. Consoles sparked, lights flickered, and the hull groaned as debris hammered against its sides. And then, silence. Only the distant hum of emergency lights and the faint crackle of overloaded circuits filled the air. Smoke drifted through the bridge, but the alarms had fallen silent. Slowly, Elias pulled himself upright, hands trembling as he gripped the console. His breath caught in his chest as he looked out through the viewport. The Zarkarath was gone. Nothing remained but scattered debris and fading flames, drifting silently through the void. They had won. A ragged cheer erupted from the crew, some shouting, some laughing, others collapsing into their seats with exhausted relief. Carter pounded his console with both fists, tears in his eyes. "We did it! We did it!" Elias leaned heavily against the console, feeling the weight of exhaustion crashing down upon him. His body ached, his mind felt hollow. But they had done what no one thought possible. Isla stepped to his side, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Earth is safe," she whispered, her voice rough with emotion. Elias took a long, shaky breath, his gaze drifting back to the void where the dreadnought had once loomed. The cost had been high. The scars of this battle would mark both the crew and the ship forever. But humanity had survived, and the galaxy would never forget the name Vanguard. "Set course for Earth," he said quietly. The helm officer nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Aye, Captain." As the engines rumbled to life, the Vanguard turned away from the battlefield, leaving only fire and silence behind as it vanished into the void, carrying home the story of a single human ship that had defied the impossible. 6 weeks later, Earth's skies burned with celebration. From the towering spires of New Geneva to the sprawling megacities of Neo-Tokyo, lights and fireworks filled the night, painting the clouds in hues of gold and crimson. The air buzzed with the hum of starships, and crowds gathered in every city square, cheering until their voices merged into a single thunderous roar. The Vanguard had returned home, not as a battered corvette, but as a legend. Above Earth, the ship drifted in orbit, its hull still scarred from battle, its armor patched with new plating. Yet it bore those scars with pride. In the eyes of humanity, the Vanguard was no longer just a vessel. It was a symbol of defiance, a name that would echo across generations. In the heart of Earth Command, within a chamber of steel and glass, Captain Elias Thorne stood before a council of admirals and diplomats. Their uniforms gleamed with medals, their eyes reflecting both pride and unease. "Captain Thorne," Admiral Helena Vex began, her voice carrying through the chamber. "On behalf of a grateful Earth, we commend you and your crew for your bravery. You've not only saved our world, you've reshaped our place in the galaxy." Murmurs of agreement echoed through the room, yet Elias could sense the unspoken tension beneath their praise. "But victory comes with consequences," Vex continued. "The destruction of the Zarkarath has shattered the Zalith Empire's image of invincibility. Already their outer colonies are rising in rebellion. Their fleets are withdrawing from occupied territories, and their high command has gone silent." She paused, her gaze steady. "But silence doesn't mean defeat. We must prepare for what comes next." Elias's hands clenched behind his back. "You believe they'll retaliate?" Vex nodded gravely. "The Zalith will not forget this humiliation. Their pride won't allow it. Even now, our intelligence networks report movements along the outer sectors, fleets regrouping, new warships under construction." The air in the room seemed to tighten. Victory had come at a cost, and that cost was the promise of future war. But Elias met Vex's gaze without hesitation. Then we'll be ready. Humanity has proven that we will not bow. If they come again, they won't find a world waiting to die. They'll find a species ready to fight. Vex's stern expression softened into the faintest hint of a smile. Spoken like a true captain. She stepped forward, holding out a silver insignia shaped like a rising phoenix. Captain Elias Thorne, for your courage and leadership, I hereby promote you to Fleet Commander of Earth's newly formed Vanguard Fleet. May you lead humanity to a future where no empire dares challenge us again. Elias accepted the insignia, feeling its weight settle in his palm. Yet the weight that truly pressed upon his shoulders wasn't made of metal. It was the burden of the battles still to come. Hours later, Elias stood alone on the observation deck of the Vanguard, gazing down at Earth's blue horizon. The celebrations echoed faintly through the comm channels, but he listened only to the hum of the ship, the heartbeat of the vessel that had carried them through hell and back. Ayla Park stepped beside him, her reflection appearing in the glass. "Fleet Commander, huh?" she said with a wry smile. "Guess that means you outrank the rest of us now." Elias chuckled softly. "Means I get the blame when things go wrong." Ayla's smile faded. "You heard what Vex said. The Zalith aren't done with us." "No," Elias agreed. "But we're not the same species they tried to wipe out. We've proven what humanity can do, and the galaxy is watching." Ayla was silent for a moment, then asked quietly, "Do you ever wonder if we went too far?" "Destroying the Zarkarath. It wasn't just a battle. We killed thousands, maybe more." Elias's gaze didn't waver from the stars. "We did what we had to. If we hadn't, Earth wouldn't be here now. None of us would." The silence that followed was heavier than before. Yet in that silence lay the truth, the choices they had made, the lives they had taken, and the price they had paid to ensure humanity's survival. A soft chime interrupted their thoughts as a holo screen flickered to life beside them. A priority transmission, marked with Earth Command's seal. Elias exchanged a glance with Ayla. No words were needed. They both understood. The next war had already begun. Without hesitation, Elias activated the comm. "Fleet Commander Thorne," he answered, his voice steady and unyielding. "What's the situation?" As the transmission began, Earth spun silently beneath them. And beyond the distant stars, unseen eyes watched and waited, because humanity's war for survival was far from over.